Assalamu alaikum guys, and welcome to another episode of Smile to Jannah. So ladies and gentlemen, a grooming gang inquiry has been released by politician Rupert Lowe. A lot of people are excited about this. He has said, our inquiry report proves that without doubt there is an undeniable link between religion and the grape gangs. Islam.
I just finished reading this report. Young girls who have been raped and molested by these barbaric Islamic Pakistanis. Where are
Islamic Pakistanis? There you go. This guy.
The amount of people this impacted was over 250,000, and that's just people that were directly impacted.
The British imperial state is treating Britain as essentially its final remaining, particularly England.
But it documents the utter barbarity of the rape, torture of girls aged from 6 to 15 in this country by mainly Pakistani Muslims and all Muslim men.
Muslims, yeah. First it was Pakistanis, yeah. Now it's Muslims. So this report has come out. Before we even get into this report, my stance is very, very clear. I'm going to show you guys. It's public. Anyone caught grooming or abusing a child, not just grooming. Yeah, because a lot of people make it just about grooming, but when it comes to other child sex exploitation, I'm going to be using the acronym CSE, yeah? So the video does not get flagged. I'm going to be censoring a lot of words because videos like this are going to get censored anyway on these mainstream platforms. So I'm going to have to be very careful about my usage of words, right? So I said anyone caught grooming or abusing a child should face the death penalty. Anyone who excludes victims or ignores perpetrators based on race or religion to push any agenda should face jail. Black, brown, more specifically brown perpetrators, everybody, yeah? Whoever is excluding victims or ignoring perpetrators, whether it's white perpetrators, whether it's black, whether it's brown, regardless. And doesn't just have to be grooming. Grooming is to do with group-based CSE, right? I'm saying all of CSE, regardless of it's in groups, regardless of whether they are in pairs, whether they're single, whether they're online, whatever type of CSE it is, there should be no mercy. And the people that are trying to weaponize it, whether they're politicians, whether it's these grifters, whoever it is that are trying to weaponize it. Now, second thing also is any victim that comes forward and talks about their trauma, good on you. Yeah, you have to come out regardless of whether you're white, brown, black, whoever you are, come out, speak to the relevant people that can help you, assist you. And it's atrocious that these things have happened to you. And it's further atrocious that you will see certain communities trying to cover it up and other communities of politicians trying to exploit it for their vote base. I think both are terrible. Yeah, people, because so-and-so comes from my country, so-and-so comes from my village, therefore I'm going to protect them. No. Unfortunately and sadly, people are now drawing a parallel between the ethnicity of these people and the religion of these people. And this is another point that I wanted to mention, which is grooming is one of the only crimes that I can think of in which the perpetrator's religion is highlighted. It's not done when it comes to Epstein. Wasn't done. Epstein happened to be Jewish. Savile happened to be, you can see over here, he was raised a devout Roman Catholic. He regularly attended mass and openly discussed his faith. Yet we do not identify him as a Christian who did CSE. In fact, loads of churches that are involved in CSE, we do not bring up the fact that it's their Christian faith, even though they happen to be church leaders. I'm sure you guys are aware about all of these sorts of things. However, over here, the main focus is grooming, and we don't want to take away from that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the report and react to it. I've spent the last couple of days going through it. It's called the Grape Gang Inquiry Report. Firstly, The first thing that we see is survivors like Femi Muhammad and Corinne, they have been excluded from the report, right? We're going to get more into who they are and possibly why they've been excluded. Corinne, you can see I've written in my notes, she's a brown Christian, so she's not white. Number two is the fact that it was chaired by Rupert Lowe, and a lot of people are saying, case in point, Claire Adams, somebody who works with survivors of grooming, and she withdrew her report when she noticed these patterns, that Rupert Lowe has been strategically talking about these issues when it benefits him. For example, now he's got the Makerfield election coming up. Back when it was a CIC or it was a split from Reform, strategically people have noticed that he only talks about these issues when it will benefit him. Also, when we look at the people that he's hired, amateurs, right? And we're going to go to who they are. Harrison Pitt, somebody who's involved. He goes, first draft finalized last night and the final version published today. Look at these three guys. They look like university students. You know what I'm saying? They're supposed to be, checking over the inquiry. None of them are experts in statistical analysis. None of them are experts when it comes to CSE or safeguarding or the law aspect of things. I want to get into who these guys actually are. And not to mention that it was funded by 20,000 British patriots. So they funded it after a number of inquiries that have come out. The Home Office report, Alexis Jay's report. So many, and they wanted to see the connection. They wanted it to be clear that it's these Pakistanis, it's these Muslims. They're the ones that are doing this. So there was clearly financial pressure to deliver the expected story. Many stories were anonymous and there was no cross-examination or independent corroboration of the victim's testimony, right? So this, anyone can make any claim, right? So there has to be corroboration, there has to be cross-examination, and none of that was done. In fact, the methodology wasn't even talked about. It wasn't even mentioned. In the key appendices, it's heavily redacted, which makes independent checking impossible, right? And the report has been criticized by the likes of Donna Rachel, who works with survivors, was a journalist that interviewed survivors 10 years ago, and she highlighted this point that the report fails to hold to account the care system, the police inadequacies when it came to the duty of care they had to the victims, and the report has been way oversimplified to blame Muslims only. That's the conclusion, right? And not only that, the testimonies of these women that have come forward have now been put into disrepute. Why? Because of unacademic numbers just being thrown around, right? Discredited, unacademic, unsubstantiated numbers like 200,000 kids have been groomed. This is absolutely false. And this has harmed survivors, and not to mention, and we're going to go into this in a bit more detail, failure at safeguarding the victims that came forward. In fact, this inquiry harmed them. The inquiry has been criticized for not following a proper methodology and not using proper terms of reference. There's been no explanation as to how the victims were selected, how what they said was corroborated, and the limitations. Yeah, you have to state the limitations when you're putting forward a study, right? This was completely amateurish. In fact, it's not being taken up by the mainstream. Rupert Lowe is complaining why the BBC is not talking about this, because there is no expert that was consulted when doing this report. In fact, people like Donna Rachel, who she admits, look, I wasn't an expert, I was a journalist, but even I offered my services. And I said, look, you have to talk about and you have to deal with the safeguarding aspect of things, but they just were not interested. In fact, there was no one with experience in statistical analysis or research methods It's just embarrassing. And you feel sorry for the victims, that they thought that, look, somebody's come up, they care about us, but yet they've messed it up. They've messed it up. Tommy Robinson has been listed as a whistleblower on page 157. Whistleblower? Tommy Robinson? I mean, that speaks for itself. And then if you look at the solutions, there's one solution that he posited, which is bring back the death penalty. I'm in agreement with that, frankly. You know what I'm saying? And then he talks about the collective punishment and the deporting of the whole family of the perpetrators, unless they can prove that they had no idea about what was going on. So in other words, you assume their guilt and they have to go out of their way to prove their innocence. Guilty till proven innocent, which goes against our judicial system. One such thing, this is very, very important, focus, says convictions of Indian origin Muslim men in grooming gang cases across Britain are notably rare compared with those of Pakistani heritage. Now, if Islam was the factor, then why are Indian Muslim groomers rare? Because surely they're following the same scripture. But why the opposite outcome? This points to sociology as the issue and not theology. Because then you would see Pakistani Muslims doing it and Indian Muslims doing it as well. But yet Indian Muslims aren't doing it. Why? Then surely it's a strong case that scripture was not involved. Right in the first line, every witness who volunteered their testimony, firstly, it gives the impression that, and he goes on to say, look, we include people that were rejected. We didn't turn anyone away. Yes, you did. Femi Muhammad is one such individual. Because she was not white, she was turned away and no reason was given. Corinne, who I mentioned, she was covered in Tommy Robinson's documentary, and GB News covered her testimony as well. It's not like she's not accepted within that crowd. And when she was complaining about safeguarding, when the inquiry was happening, they just didn't like that. And she was not included. Why? In her words, not mine. Really, as a survivor, I see how the white girls get supported better than us brown ones. Like we deserved it because we're brown? No, we matter too. We were children. And then somebody goes, you literally slandered the inquiry from day one. She said, I slandered the inquiry because how me and over 10 of the other survivors were treated. And I still slander it. What they did to me and the others is out of effing order. Now pee off, you be. Yeah, because she was calling her names as well. And you can see when they speak out to the people that were involved in the inquiry, you can see it says this person's been blocked. You know, many people have been blocked. This is appalling. Yeah, let's get back to the report. So Donna Rachel supported Femi Muhammad, and then she was receiving anti-Semitic abuse and death threats. In fact, Donna Rachel did a video in which she was laughing at the complete unprofessional nature of the inquiry. In fact, she's saying you can barely even call it that. Yeah, there's so many holes in it and it's a disservice to the survivors. Right, so based upon that, even though what she does is she's got a website called The Survivors, in which she is supporting survivors of the grooming gangs. But look, I thought you guys weren't anti-Semitic. I thought the pro-Palestinians were anti-Semitic. Here, because somebody goes against your narrative, because they go against what your people are saying, it doesn't matter who they are now, right? So she actually attended the inquiry because she was invited, and she called it shambolic. She goes, they didn't know what it was for. She offered help and they rejected. There was no methodology and they worked backwards from the answer. Normally, that's pathetic, right? That's not even how you conduct an inquiry. One survivor was silenced and attempted to unalive herself. Another was ignored and also attempted to unalive herself. When they went onto social media to talk about the experience, they were blocked and they were looked down upon. A third one was mixed race and she was turned away because she was not white. So already, guys, we're seeing a very different angle than what we're seeing on X, because this report is flying about on X. A lot of Muslims are getting messages from their non-Muslim friends going, what the hell is this, mate? 250,000, which we're going to get to, of course. So he goes, deep gratitude to the entire inquiry team. Okay, so Sammy Woodhouse, she's a part of Restore Britain, a survivor. Many critique her for politicizing her suffering, but again, that's up to her. Then we go down. Goes, Dr. Mark Dury has been extremely generous in enriching the report that follows with his expert knowledge. Finally, guys, we have an expert. Yeah, this is what I wanted. Yeah, he's a doctor. Yeah, Dr. Mark Dury. Let's see what Dr. Mark Dury is. He's a Christian missionary priest. Right, maybe he is an expert. I don't want to judge him. He's a scholar of, let's see, linguistics. Don't know how that's going to help in the inquiry, but he also claims to be scholar of theology. And when he says theology, he means Islam, that he learnt at the Melbourne School of Theology, which is an evangelical Christian college. So we learnt about Islam from people whose job it is to refute Islam. Right, he's a fellow at the Middle East Forum. Now, some of you guys might go, that's ringing a bell. Yes, because Tommy Robinson was funded by the Middle East Forum. The director is Greg Roman, who's a former Israel Defense Ministry employee. There you go. Yeah, Israel linked. He was quoted 13 times by the terrorist Anders Breivik. And the president of Middle East Forum is Daniel Pipes, a Jewish Zionist. He got the Guardian of Zion award for those supportive of Israel. Need I say any more, ladies and gentlemen? Then he goes, I'm grateful to Charlie Downs, who's a spokesperson for Restore Britain, which is his party. Joshua Firm, who's an ethno-nationalist podcaster on Lotus Eaters, because that's what you need, that level of expertise. You've got to bring a podcaster in, right? Then Harrison Pitt, he's a senior policy fellow at Restore Britain, right-hand man of Rupert Lowe, who, when the inquiry was going on and people were talking about safeguarding, he said, just pick up an iPhone and film them. That's the level of concern he has about the victims, right? And of course, we got Graham Smith, a barrister who's hired by Restore Britain. No one is an expert, frankly. Yeah, they're just lads that have come together from that party to whip up a document, it seems, right? First draft finalized late last night, and the final version was published in the morning, because bish bash bosh, that's what you gotta do, yeah? Right, then he gives a forward. He goes, Britain doesn't have a racism problem. A very strange thing to say. It has an immigration problem. Why can't we say it's got a both problem? Yeah, they don't exactly contradict each other. The two aren't mutually exclusive, right? This report establishes beyond any doubt, which is not demonstrated at all. Yeah, he said it in his tweet. He said it here in the forward. Then he gives a quote from Albert Einstein, which is false, actually. Yeah, I've got the real quote up there. Not a very good start. Then he's got a very obscure quote from Nietzsche. Man is the cruelest animal. So we start with the introduction. It says Muslim Pakistani gangs, and like I said, we don't identify criminals by their religion for anything else except for grooming. If that is something that you want to do, then we got to do it for everything, right? We got to do it for the church CSE scandals. We got to do it for Neville Husband, who is a church minister, who's the most prolific CSE guy here in the UK. We got to talk about the biggest grooming ring worldwide that had a Jewish man running the website and a bunch of Christian majority countries that were involved, right? We got to bring in religion everywhere then. If not, then you're just being disingenuous, right? So like I said, they try and make it seem like they included everyone. Survivors were finally given the platform because they had been denied for so long and were central to the inquiry. So the executive summary: the Grape Gang inquiry examined the systematic targeting of vulnerable girls, overwhelmingly white British. Why don't you mention the religion over here, yeah? If you're gonna start mentioning religion, mention it for everyone, right? Everyone. Rupert Lowe, your religion, the experts that you had, why didn't you mention that he was an evangelical Christian? We want to know about it all, yeah, if that's what you're going to do. And then they say that since the 1950s, and then they quote an imam, a doctor, yeah, Dr. Taj Hage, an imam with the Oxford Islamic Congregation, believes the true proportion of gang members who are Muslims to be around 95%. Is this why I'm reading a report? Because you've got some imam that believes something. Right. But Taj Hage also believes in God. Yes, he rejects the hadith. He believes you should ban the burqa, but he believes in the Quran. Are you going to believe in that? Take what he's saying? Of course not. He also was called an anti-Semite by one of these Israeli newspapers, in which he said Zionism is Nazism. So are we going to just put all of his beliefs down, or just the belief? It's just a belief, right? Is this why I'm reading an inquiry to know about beliefs of random people? I mean, what expertise does he have? Oh, he runs an Oxford Islamic congregation. Oh, how convenient. And ironically, he rejects Sharia. So there's a question mark as to how much of a Muslim he really is. But regardless, they included him in the report, in the executive summary. So we go down, and then they talk about al-wara wal-bara. Yeah, and he goes, it demands enmity towards non-Muslims. The superiority of men over women. Forced marriage. That's a load of nonsense. Where's the, can we get a little one, a footnote or something that proves that, you've got this from somewhere credible? No, you're not going to see that for a lot of these. Look, there's a few here. There, Christian Concern. Oh, beautiful Christian Concern. And another article from London Loves Business. Okay, great. And Lord Pearson, you're going to know his name by the end of this episode, definitely. And then talks about having intercourse with non-Muslim captives. So are we dealing with war here, or what's going on? I mean, he says it started from 1955 when 4 Bradford-based Pakistanis were charged with raping a 15-year-old girl from Middlesbrough. Yeah, and he gave the link there. Thank God for that. I had to make an account, and I found the article. It's right here. And look at what the article says. Accused. The 4 Pakistanis were accused. He's saying they were charged. Secondly, the girl told the men that she was 16 and took money. So based upon these things, it was supposed to carry on. Yeah, the hearing was adjourned. By the way, they arrived late, and the father explained that he had slept in and had to catch a later train. He was rebuked by the chairman, who said, you must realize that you have kept the court, the legal profession and everybody else waiting because you slept in. This is a serious matter. And bear in mind, one of them was a Sikh. Yeah, what was his name? Let's get his name over here. Kartar Singh. Singh is a Sikh. Mention his religion. Yeah, mention his religion. You got to do it everywhere now, right? So Donna Rachel also made a point about this, that the writers don't really understand the nuances when it comes to the language. They're talking about the county lines, which is referring to phone lines, and they're confusing it with county demarcation lines, which is a big blunder. Yeah, you don't get these when it comes to serious academic reports that have a serious budget, right? So the 250, this is the report, yeah? The 250,000 figure originates directly from a statement in the House of Lords by Lord Pearson. What did he say? Do the government accept that if we extrapolate nationally the J report on Rotherham and other reports from these towns, there appear to have been upwards of 250,000 young girls. In other words, if you extrapolate the data from these few towns, then you arrive at 250,000. And then he added, it's probably an underestimate. It's an estimate. It's a guess, an unofficial guess. There is no backing of this. It's been debunked by Full Fact. And if you go on the next page, actually page 113, you can see the 250,000 figure is not a precise count. So he admits it's not precise. No such count exists because the British state has failed to record it. And we may regard it as a conservative estimate. So it's an estimate. It's not a precise count. No such count exists. But it's being plastered everywhere like it's a fact. Right, let's carry on. Then, look at this. Look at the language. 19,000 children were identified as SE victims in England in 1 year alone. Right, you can see this is referring to just CSE, right? Not grooming, CSE. Then, despite the reluctance of the state actors to name or tackle the problems of the grape gangs, now they've linked it with grooming, thereby rendering it to be false. It's not a grooming statistic. In fact, it's been deceptively used over here to boost up the grooming numbers. And this is why a lot of people say there is a problem. Of course there's a problem. Donna Rachel says herself, if you look in the Midlands, there'll be a lot of Pakistani gangs. If you come here, there'll be, in London, there'll be a lot of Yardi gangs. There'll be a lot of Romanian gangs and so on and so forth. So this is not just linked to a particular ethnicity. It's linked to criminality. These are criminal groups that are working to subvert the law, bringing drugs in, intoxication and all sorts of things. Disgusting. Then they also admit it is simply not possible to know the scale. Then why are you bringing 250,000 as if it is some sort of fact? It's being plastered everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And sorry, I forgot to add this as well, yeah? When this report is imported into UK fact-check politics, it has a trust score of 18 out of 100, ladies and gentlemen. That's a low trust score. Look, people are picking up this 250,000 white British girls raped by Muslim gangs report finds. People are just going to be going by the headlines. They're not going to be watching long videos like this, right? So then we continue. When you look at this map, you go, oh my God, 149 local authority districts across UK. You got grape gangs there. Oh my God, what's going on? Yeah, because the term grape gang has been synonymously linked with Pakistanis, you think they're bloody everywhere, mate. Yeah, however, firstly, it's not just referring to them. Look, you've got dark red, which is confirmed, and light red, which is suspected. Firstly, why not have totally different colors? Yeah, so we can tell the difference. Yeah, because somebody just flicking through will go, flipping heck, this is ridiculous. And why are you putting suspected? Suspected by who? Your podcaster and a few of your party members. Or by that dodgy imam, Dr. Taj, whatever his head is. Or that Christian missionary guy that's learned about Islam from his local Christian missionary college. Or Lord Pearson. Yeah, what other figure is he going to give? 1 million? Somebody, Sarah, I don't know her name. There was an MP called Sarah something. She gave 1 million number. You just start throwing numbers about. Yeah, remember with the 40 beheaded babies that Israel put forward. It was never proven. This is the new 40 beheaded babies. That's what it is, right? Because people unfortunately don't check where the research is actually from. Do they care where it's from? Or do they just want to reaffirm the bias that they already have? Then there's anonymous whistleblowers. How do we know? Have they been independently verified? Or is it again Tommy Robinson, the whistleblower, and his friend, the coke addict? It's like, who is it? And frankly, the trust level's not that high. It's on 18 apparently, which is a low trust score. Then when you've got victims talking, there's no direct quotes from them. Like, are they mentioning Muslim, or is it the person that's writing down their account mentioning that they're Muslim? Or is it because of their faith that they're doing it, or they just happen to be Muslim? Then we get to the demographics and the culture, right? So what's the criteria that they're using? Because the Muslim thing is the new thing, right? We knew about the Pakistanis. Now this report apparently, undeniably shows the Muslim link. So what is it? Let's have a look. In the cases where perpetrators of Pakistani heritage were named publicly in court records or reports, here we go, their names have consistently been Muslim in character.
Wow.
That's what you're going with? That's the criteria? Or they got Muslim names? We think. That's not a very good criteria, is it? And then look at the researcher. This Peter McLaughlin guy, his book In Easy Meat. So you're now linking the Alexis J inquiry, that level of credibility with a self-published guy called Peter McLaughlin, who's a co-author of Tommy Robinson's book as well. I mean, what is this? And then they got 87% of those convicted bore distinctively Muslim names. How do you know? A lot of these Christians in these Arab and African countries have Muslim names, and Muslims can have Christian names as well. And you've got people that have Muslim names, but they're not Muslim, right? You can't just assume somebody's got a Muslim name, therefore is Muslim. So anyone who's called Mark has to be a Christian. What? Because it's one of the alleged 4 gospel authors. Then we come down and they start giving us, further cases, right? So they go, a mainly African heritage gang in Banbury. It wasn't an African gang, because look, Kagiso Manasseh. Manasseh is a biblical name. Yeah, tell us his religion. Use the same criteria. Yeah, it's a biblical name. Kudzwa Hova is Zimbabwean, right? And Zimbabwe is 85% Christian. So that's not a Muslim name, right? Then you look at Alexandru Ney. Alexandru, that's a Christian name. Ney is a Romanian name, which is 99% Christian. So only 3 out of 7 names were Muslim. Yeah, but you went with, because majority were Christian, you went with African heritage in Banbury, right? A Romanian grape gang in Rotherham. Why aren't you not mentioning their religion here? Because Romania is 99% Christian country. And then over here it talks about Operation Sanctuary. Yeah, where it's saying that nearly all of the published names were Islamic. Right. One of the names was Prabhat Nelly. What religion was he? It's not a Muslim name, frankly. Or Carolan Gallon. What religion was he? Was he referring to biblical verses that degrade women? That say it's okay to grape them, give 50 shekels to the father and live with them for the rest of their lives? Or 1 Timothy 2:12, that women can't teach men, they need to be quiet. It was Eve, not Adam, that was deceived and will be saved via childbearing. Or Numbers 31:18, that says take the young girls for yourselves. Were they following those biblical verses? So then, and even when you analyze the reports, there's so many contradictions, right? I was told white girls are trash and they are all whores, right? But then there are parallels made with wives. Well, surely that wouldn't apply to you because you're not married to them, right? Then they start making these claims that witches in Pakistan are blonde. So blondes are more evil. I've never heard that in my life. There's no Pakistani that I've heard that says that. In fact, the blonde color is actually preferred because it's unusual in Pakistan, right? So people actually link blonde with golden hair. They actually describe it as golden hair. So it's actually given more a sense of beauty, right? Maybe some prat did say that. And then some of them say that they were married, but I thought white women were trash. You can't marry them. You just use them and discard them. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. Then a thoroughly debunked report of Quilliam is being resurfaced again. Yeah, they're the ones that first used the term or used the number 85%, and which was debunked by scholars like Ella Cobain and Waqas Tufail. Their methodology and statistical analysis was very weak, very similar to this report. It was just written by a bunch of amateurs. And not to mention, it's a very small sample. Over 12 years, they only looked at 264 cases, and they came up with the 85% number. And it's been quoted again. Then we continue. Then they start making a contrast with Poland by saying their grape stats have gone down, and he's linking it with immigration. But just some basic research will tell you that there's underreporting that takes place in Poland. Why? Because the level of proof that's required is very high. Not to mention that conviction rates are very low, and a lot of people that have gone to the police have described their accounts as humiliating. Yeah, that their Interrogations have been humiliating, and as a result, there is a great amount of distrust for the authorities like the police. So he jumped straight to immigration. Why? Because that's his thing. This isn't a report, it's propaganda. And then they go to the influence of Islam, where they have quote mined and given their own interpretation. No scholarly interpretation, no academia, no making sure that, you know what, we're gonna say that this is what they believe, their scholars have said this, boom, boom, boom. None of that, mate. Here's a quote, here's what we think. This report is embarrassing, and it's so bad that there are real life consequences on victims, that for many of them this was, something of hope, but these people have twisted it for their own gain, which is appalling, frankly. Is this an issue? Grooming? Of course it is. Are criminals of certain ethnicities or that happen to be of certain faiths perpetrating these crimes, i.e. Pakistanis that happen to be Muslims? Yes, of course. Should we deal with that? Yes, absolutely. And first and foremost, I should say this as well, we should not be covering up because there are cover-ups that were done. No, these people should be shunned. They should be disgraced, and we should deal with them first, because these people are harming innocent people and saying all sorts of disgusting nonsense, frankly, that, when you read these inquiries, some of, not this inquiry, but other inquiries that are more credible, you will see that these victims have real stories, real experiences, and they're harrowing experiences. May Allah protect the victims, and may Allah punish the perpetrators. And if you find out who these people are, you should deal with them. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's leave it there. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.